Welcome to Ransom Garage. In this video, we're going to make a custom cargo carrier. I recently acquired a vehicle that had roof racks on it, and I really wanted to put a basket up on the racks. I started to design one from scratch, and I had done a quick estimate of what it was going to take to build, and it was about $150. Probably would have taken me 8 to 10 hours, somewhere thereabouts. Then I started to look for ones that were off the shelf. Prices were all over the place. And I really wanted something unique, but I didn't want to build it from scratch. So I bought an off-the-shelf Harbor Freight rack. It retails at $89.99. You can apply 20% coupon on those. My price out the door was somewhere around $72 or $73. But then what I decided to do is figure out how I was going to make it unique. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make your cargo carrier, whether it's Harbor Freight or otherwise, look just a little bit different. And we're going to do it with a few tools that I use for fabricating, mostly an automatic punch, fantastic tool. If you don't have one, get one. And then a punch flare tool. Most folks may not have one, but the look it gives is quite unique. I'll show you a way around that if you don't want to invest in one. What I'm doing is not earth-shattering. A lot of it came from things that friends taught me over the years, some things that I picked up on my own. Hopefully you enjoy the video. And I will apologize for the microphone on this camera. It's a China-made Xiaomi 4K cam. They are not known for great audio quality. Hopefully you can bear with it. Thanks. Here we have the basket. It's already assembled. It comes in 3 pieces out of the box. It takes a little bit of handling to get the pipes to line up, but they are clearly marked with A's and B's labels, so you can only assemble it in one direction. You get what you pay for with Harbor Freight. This one had been handled while the paint was wet. It had fingerprints on it. There were some pieces of MIG wire sticking out. I scuffed the whole thing and I resprayed it. Additionally, what I've done is I removed this plate that comes on the front of it. I'll show you where it goes. This would be the front side. This plate was pre-installed with 4 Phillips screws. I decided I did not want to advertise for them, but I also decided I didn't want a solid plate. I could have easily removed the label, but not really the look I was after. Overall, it's not that bad. I don't plan on putting any cargo inside of it. I'm just after looks. I feel like for the price, it's worth it. What I've decided to do is cover all 4 sides of this basket with 40 thousandths aluminum. In order to cover the sides, you're going to need a piece that's about 35.5 inches long to take you from round to round. And the height is going to be somewhere around 4.5 inches, which will be enough to allow you to attach to the side of the pipe. For the fronts, you're going to need a piece that's going to be 28 inches wide, which will be about the size of the factory plate, and 4 3/4 tall. I chose 40 thousandths aluminum because it's lightweight, it's easy to work with. And if you go to a local supply shop, you could likely get it in different colors. So what I'm going to do next is show you how to lay out in order to get this thing looking perfect. What I'm going to demonstrate for you now is how I would go about doing layout. This particular piece is scrap. It is actually not going to go on the cargo carrier, but I wanted to use this for demonstration purposes. So the width is wrong, the height is wrong, but what's more important is how I do the layout work. Now, for the sheets that will go on the cargo carrier, it's important to get the center line of the height. And what I usually will do is I'll measure the overall height, I'll take a set of verniers, I will set them for half the height, and I'll use the thumb wheel to lock it in. Then what I'll do is drag along the edge of the piece, and that'll give me a scribe mark along the center line of the part. It's easiest if you sort of lay the vernier down so you can drag it at a low angle, and it'll make a nice scribe line all the way across the center of the piece. And because this is plastic coated, that scratch won't matter. The next thing that I'm going to want is the center line of the width. This particular piece of scrap is 28 inches, so therefore I'm going to want a Sharpie mark at 14 inches in the intersection of my center line. So I'm going to make that mark there. The next thing that I like to use is something that's really, really handy. If you don't have one, you should get one. And that's called an automatic punch. This particular one happens to come from Harbor Freight. You can get them on Amazon. Look for the link and look for the photo as reference. And this piece is really, really useful because when you're making your punch mark, it's much more precise than using a regular punch and hammer. So what I would do with this piece is literally go on the intersection of my scribe and my Sharpie mark, and you just push down. You don't even use a hammer. You push, and when it snaps, it'll leave a punch mark. Now, for the plates that are going on the basket, I've decided to put the holes in the plate on 3.5-inch intervals. So what you would do from here is, for the front and center plates, what you're going to measure from your center mark is 3.5 inches on each Sharpie mark, and you're going to go down the entire piece. And that's going to establish the spacing you need to make sure that your holes are evenly spaced and they're laid out appropriately. You're going to take your automatic punch, you're going to put your marks on those 3.5-inch intervals. The next step would be to take your 1/8 starter bit and drill on all these punch marks. Then after that, if you choose to use a punch flare tool, I would take your step bit and go all the way through, drill it to a 1/2 inch. If you're going to use a hole saw, then what you want to do is just leave the 1/8 bit and then use that as your 1/8 hole, use that as your starter hole for your hole saw. You do have the option to use, there is a difference between a dimple die and a punch flare tool. I use them interchangeably sometimes. The punch flare tool will pop the hole and curve. If you get a dimple die, you can drill with a hole saw to, say, 1.5-inch hole, which is what I choose for this project, and you can get a dimple die, which costs about half the price as a punch flare tool, and the dimple die will put the curve on the hole, so you can use that as an option as well. If you end up using material that does not have the plastic coating and does not give you the benefit that I have here of marking on this plastic, what you can do is, and I've done it ahead of time on this piece, put a piece of painter's tape roughly in the center line of your height, and then take a Sharpie, make a mark that's at the center line along both ends of the piece. Get yourself a long straight edge, and then draw your center line on the piece of tape. Then proceed with the same steps as I had done on the other side, where you're going to find the left, right, center line, and then you're going to make your holes at the appropriate interval of spacing, which is 3.5 inches. Of note, if I didn't mention it already, when you make the sides, the spacing of the holes is the same, but you start at a different location. And that's because the sides have an even number of holes. The way you want to lay the sides out are, you still find the center line, but your first hole to the right is going to be 1 3/4 inches on center left, and then another hole is going to be 1 3/4 inches on center left and center right. And now you have them at 3.5-inch spacing. From there onward, go back to your 3.5-inch all the way across. All that we're doing here is, because it's an even number of holes, we don't put a hole in the center of the width. You leave that as equal spacing between the first two holes, and again, it's going to be an even number of holes. Hopefully, you found those layout tips helpful. Okay, with that really nice punch mark, I take a 1/8 starter bit. I can locate it nicely into that punch hole. And now I have a starter hole for my next step. Now, as I mentioned, I want holes in this plate. What I've decided to use is what's called, commonly called the dimple die or a punch rounding die. If you don't have access to one, you can also use a hole saw. I chose a dimple die because I want the holes that have a rounded edge. But what I've opted for is 1.5-inch holes all the way across the front and side plates. If you're going to use a dimple die, what you'll need to do next is take a step bit. I like to use these a lot. Take one of these bits. They go through this material really well. And I would drill this hole all the way out to 1/2 inch. If you decide that you don't want to invest in a punch, they cost about $100. You can buy them from All Star, you can buy them from Mittler Brothers. The other option is you can use a hole saw. Because we have this starter hole here, we know it's exactly in the location we want it. That'll make it real easy to locate this hole saw, and I can drill through here and it'll be precise and located exactly where I like it. This is okay, it just makes the hole a little sharper, and the panel won't be quite as strong as it would be with the dimple die. I'm going to fast forward, and what I have here is a piece that's going to go on the front. What you can see is there's one hole in the center, as I indicated, and I have 3 holes to each side. The spacing on these holes is going to be from center to center 3.5 inches. So after I made my first one, I measured over 3.5 inches, Sharpie mark, punch. Then from that dot to this dot, 3.5 inches, Sharpie mark, punch, 3.5 here to here. That gave me evenly spaced holes, and that put this hole in the center. And what I liked about that spacing was that it made for visually a good-looking spacing between each of these holes, and also the distance between the last hole and the edge of the plate. And what I really like about these is they add some structure and integrity to the piece, as opposed to if it was just flat and hole sawed, it would still be a little wobbly. Not that that's the end of the world. If I were to make flat holes with a hole saw, what I would likely do is I would put more attachment points from here to the basket to keep it straight and level. But these holes will make it nice. Now, one thing I want to share with the design that I've opted for is, as I previously mentioned, the height for the front and rear is going to be 4 3/4. This panel is actually 5 3/4 tall. The reason why I did that is because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on my brake, and I'm going to take a 1/2 inch of height off of each side, and I'm going to bend it 90 degrees. The reason why I'm doing that is because I want the panel to overwrap the basket on the top and the bottom sides. I'll show you what that looks like in a pre-made piece. Because I don't have enough room to bring the brake into the garage, I'm going to have to do this part outside. It's about 6 degrees out, but I wanted to show you how this works. So this piece already has my punches done. And because I need to bend a flange in this direction, I've scribed a line to the amount or the height that I need on both sides. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the brake, and I'm going to clamp the piece down on my scribe line the best that I can, line it up. A little hard to see with the glare of the sunlight here. Alright, now I'm right on my line. I'm going to lock it in, and I'm going to bend my 90. That gives me my flange. I'm going to unlock it and do the same thing on the other side. It's really hard to see that scribe line with the sunlight, and because I make the line so faint, it's difficult to see it. And lock it in and bend the other 90. And now I've got my 2 flanges that can now wrap around the bar. What I have here is one of the sides. Now the sides have an even number of holes. And what I did for a side is I found the center line of the length, I made myself a scribe line, and then the first hole in either direction, the center of the hole is 2 inches off the center line. But after I established that first hole, then each hole is the same 3.5 inch spacing, because I wanted the spacing of the holes to look the same from side to side as I do front and rear. But you can see with this particular piece, where I made it a 1/2 inch longer on each edge, I have the bends. And now what these bends are going to allow me to do is wrap around the sides of the pipe. This is something you don't have to do. You could just go with straight cut. I just chose to do this because I wanted the wrap around. And then what we're going to show you next is how to attach these.